There is no war in history that has taken more lives than World War II, and most of us know the major battles that took place. However, some of the forgotten battles are unbelievably important in deciding the outcome of the war, changing its direction in profound ways. For example, do you know what possessed Hitler to attack his ally, the Soviet Union? A mistake which cost him the war. Let's take a look at some of World War II's forgotten battles and operations that changed the trajectory of the bloodiest war in human history. The Battle of Attu. This was the only time that the Axis forces set foot on American soil. In fact, it was the first time any invading force had set foot on American soil since 1812. The Battle of Attu lasted for around 18 days and took the lives of 3,800 Americans in total, if you include those who died due to illnesses. 2,000 Japanese soldiers were killed in the retaking of Attu, making it one of the deadliest singular battles America was involved in. The Battle of Attu was a part of a specialist Japanese operation that was designed to paralyze the American Navy. The bombing of Dutch Harbor took place 6 months after the infamous Pearl Harbor attack. America responded to this attack on their homeland with a brutal and swift response. They launched prolonged airstrikes on the island before finally sending 12,500 troops to retake the island. The Japanese army did not make the recapture easy. They employed small group tactics, hiding in foxholes for hours and picking off American infantry with snipers. The Americans had to check every hollow on the island, such was the tactics of the invading forces. What's more, the weather on Attu was freezing. The American army hadn't taken this into account when supplying their men with outfits. More American men died due to the harsh winter conditions than they did from enemy fire. Just when American troops thought they had all but won, Colonel Yamasaki ordered a counterattack on American forces with just 800 men. In reality, the counterattack was a suicide mission designed to kill as many American troops as possible. A nightmare ending to the second deadliest battle in the Pacific Theater. Operation Iskra, a Soviet military operation aimed at breaking the Wehrmacht's siege of Leningrad. The main aim was to create a land connection to Leningrad, which would enable a safe route away from the harsh weather conditions of Russia to transport food, munitions, and troops to the Eastern Front. Before the battle began, Soviet bombers went in to disrupt the flow of reinforcements available to the Nazis. The real battle began on 12 January 1943 at 0930 hours. The Soviets spent 2 hours firing artillery at the German forces, and then 5 minutes later, the infantry went in along with its heavy machinery. The sheer size of the Soviet army was too much for the ill-prepared German defense. Russians were expert fighters in cold weather conditions, and they used this to full effect during this battle. This early success didn't stop the Soviets from advancing further into Leningrad. Over the next 5 days, they did not stop advancing, albeit slowly. Using the 12th Ski Brigade, the Soviet army flanked the German troops. After 9 days of brutal warfare, the Soviets retook Leningrad. This was an incredibly bloody war. It is estimated that 800,000 civilians died and 2 million troops from both sides. The Soviets reported that around 670,000 of their troops were killed during this operation, many from starvation, stress, and exposure. Operation Dragoon. While not an entirely unknown battle, most people don't quite understand how important it was to the Allied victory. Operation Dragoon was initially supposed to be initiated in conjunction with Operation Overlord, the Battle of Normandy. However, the lack of naval capacity made this an impossible venture. The air superiority of the Allied forces, followed by a large French uprising in southern France, made for a swift victory for the Allied forces. The initial landing consisted of 151,000 personnel and 75,000 French resistance forces to the Germans' 285,000 troops and 14,810 artillery pieces. After all the fighting of the initial landing, Allied forces lost 25,754 men to the Germans' 7,000. 135,000 German troops surrendered or were captured as well during the invasion and retreat. The goal of this operation was to seize control of the German forces' Mediterranean docks and open up a new front in the south, mounting pressure on the Nazis. Once the full army of the Allied forces had landed, the chase was on to destroy the retreating German army. The Nazis stopped retreat for a while at Dijon until their full force could retreat. The Allied forces attacked Dijon, but were unable to make significant gains on the battlefield. After the retreat was completed, the Germans ordered a complete withdrawal of southern France to the northeast. They stopped at the Vosges region, and by that point, Allied forces needed to regroup. During the next 4 weeks, Allied forces were able to liberate all of southern France from the grip of Nazi control. While heavy losses had been incurred, especially by American troops, the Allied forces saw this operation as a success, and it did manage to achieve all of its goals. The Battle of Normandy has overshadowed this major military operation, but the success of Operation Dragoon helped to weaken the German forces greatly. Battle of Suomussalmi. While many see the Soviet Union as the heroes of World War II, we must always remember that their actions had been purely selfish. Before the Germans betrayed them, they were busy cooperating with the German forces and even tried a little land grab themselves in Finland. This lesser-known battle is known as Finland's greatest success, as they managed to defeat a superior attacking force. This battle took place from 30th November to 8th of January 1940. The Soviets sent a relatively modest 29,816 troops to the battle against an army of 19,000 Finnish troops. It was probably this lack of troops who were ill-equipped that caused the loss to the Soviets. The Soviets advanced to the village of Suomussalmi in the intent of marching towards the city of Oulu, thus cutting Finland in half. The village was taken with a little resistance, but the Finnish made sure to destroy the village before they got there to deny the Soviets of any shelter on arrival. From there, the Soviets launched a number of failed attacks. They attempted an attack over the frozen lakes onto the villages of Nikanselka and Hakapera, which failed completely. They then attempted to take Polanka, which also failed. After these botched attacks, the Finns immediately began to draw up plans to retake Suomussalmi. After a few skirmishes, they retook the village and drove the Soviets out of the country and gaining a lot of heavy equipment for their troubles. It may have been this botched attempt to take northern Finland that encouraged Hitler to attack the Soviet Union, an attack that destroyed Germany's chances of winning the war. Operation Mars. The second Rukiev-Sikekov offensive operation, also known as Operation Mars, was a code name for a Soviet counteroffensive against German forces during World War II. Between November 25th and December 20th, 1942, it took place near Moscow in the Ruskev salient. Georgy Zhukov served as the offensive's coordinator. It was a joint operation of the Soviet Western Front and the Kalinin Front. The offensive was one of the several extremely brutal encounters that took place close to Ruskev, Skyskievka, and Vlasma between January 1942 and March 1943, and were collectively remembered in Soviet and Russian history as the battles of Ruskev. Due to the massive losses, especially on the Soviet side, the fights were dubbed the Ruskev meat grinder. They were consigned to a minor role in Soviet military history for a very long time. The formidable German Ninth Army would be encircled and destroyed in the Ruskev salient during Operation Mars, which was scheduled to begin in late October. Battles of Khalkin Gol. The battles of Khalkin Gol were pivotal clashes of unreported border wars between the Soviet Union, Japan, Mongolia, and Manchukuo in 1939. The river Khalkin Gol, which flows across the battleground, inspired the conflict's name. Nomonhan is a local village that is on the boundary between Mongolia and Manchuria. The Japanese Sixth Army was defeated as a result of the conflicts.